Hello, everyone. I was wrapping up my audio commentary for the Kenny vs. Spenny episode Who Can Put on a Better Concert when I was able to get in touch with two members of the famous rock ensemble, the Spennies. We talked about their experience being on the show and their life outside of it. They were both very kind and great guys to be talking to. They do a great job of telling their own story, so I don't want to bore you with my version. I just wanna let you hear it from them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Hawes. I grew up in North York, Ontario, in Canada, and have left Canada in 2005. Traveled all over the world. Spent the last 11 years living in the UK, and now I live in beautiful Copenhagen in Denmark. And I work from home, and this is my home office. So, hi. Um, I grew up as a musician. I used to play classical guitar, and then during high school, got tired of running scales, so picked up, a lot of death metal and pop and funk and alternate styles, and ended up moving to bass and played with all sorts of really fun Canadian bands. And many of my friends also played music. And professionally, I ended up building some websites. And in the mid 90s, spent some time in Silicon Valley doing some work for some .com startups, and then ended up back in Toronto in 1997, and was working for the Discovery Channel. And what I was doing for the Discovery Channel at the time, we had a website called exn.ca. I was building it in Cold Fusion markup language, CFML, with a SQL database, working with an all-star team of Andrew Adamson and Liam Nickerson and Paul Kalisiak, and just having a really great time. And as I dove deeper and deeper into CFML, I started playing a little bit with building my own community site. So in 97 or 98, I launched a website called kickinthehead.com. Still own the domain. It's available for sale if anybody wants it. And built a Canadian music website, which basically was a user-generated content site, which had thousands of listings of Canadian bands that were submitted, a really great discography section. And then over time, I introduced a classified ad section. And anybody could post a classified ad, but I also allowed people to buy featured ads. And then one day, I received a call, maybe it was an email followed up by a phone call, by the production company of Kenny vs. Spenny. And they said that they wanted to buy an ad to run to promote auditions they were hosting for a reality TV show up in Downsview. It was at Dufferin and Shepherd, and it was on the southwest corner. It was a rehearsal studio. And I'm like, of course, no problem. So very glad to take their money. They sent me a check because that was how we transacted back in the day. And posted the ad. And I think the auditions were 2 weeks after that. And so I just called all my friends up and said, hey, this sounds like it could be a really fun opportunity to be on this reality TV show. And I didn't know what it was, but just why not? They said they would serve pizza for lunch and have some beers. So why not? So I went to the rehearsals with the auditions with a number of my friends, including Noah Egelnick, who grew up in Thornhill, who is a world-class drummer. Today he lives on the Isle of Man, he gigs, he records, he's amazing. And I think that there is a brief clip in Kenny vs. Spenny of him playing. He was by far the best drummer, but he didn't look as cool as the drummer they chose with the amazing hat and toque, who still had good chops. He could play fine. And then another one of my friends came, a guy named Jason Englishman, or Jay Englishman, who grew up in Walkerton, Ontario, or Hanover, and who was recorded an album called Poor Little Rock Star in the late 90s, I guess 98 or 99. And it was a top 40 album, and he had a number of tracks that were on the radio. And he's just a brilliant musician, a great guitarist, great singer, huge stage presence and drama, and just joy radiates when he plays. And so we were hanging out, watching all of the guitarists audition, and there were some really good guitarists, but he just rocks up, takes his shirt off, plugs in, cranks it, and just was amazing. I think he played Eruption, just because, who doesn't spend all of their adolescent years practicing Eddie Van Halen solos? And he just like plays it and does amazingly well. And it just is like snap call. Okay, here's our guitarist.
Basically, Jeff called me. He was like, "So there's this show, these producers that have called me, and they want to run this ad, and so I'm running this ad, but why don't we go down?" And I was like, "Why don't we go down?" Right? Let's see what happens. And so there were three of us who were friends from high school, um, Jeff, myself, and Noah, and we all went, and it was crazy, right? And for me, I was just coming off my career as a performer at the time. Like I'd kind of gone up and then come crashing down as a lot of artists do, particularly in Canada. And so I was like, well, let's just go fly under the radar. It was like going to a karaoke competition, you know what I mean? It's just something we went and did for fun and giggles to see if we could get away with doing it.
I'm pretty ignorant. Do you want to tell me, like, kind of what your life had been up until that moment, like as far as accomplishments and your musical
Well,
career?
there's not much of an accomplishment. I mean, I was a singer-songwriter in Toronto through the late '90s, who lucked his way into a record deal. Um, had had a record put out. There was a single that came out that did fairly well through the summer of 2000, and the video on Much Music, and then nothing else really happened, and so that was the end of that. And I languished around in the music industry for a couple more years playing before going into the production side, and then just growing up and becoming a civilian again, like everybody else.
She says life sucks, it's the truth to me. Didn't you think it would be better than this? So where's that prize that I was promised? Where's my great reward? Where's my happiness?
Juno Award nominated musician. His sister is Jenny the Englishman, also known as Estero, who is a trip hop artist, hip hop artist. I'm not sure what the genre is called. I'm a little out of it, but she's one of the best singers in the world. So, just interesting. You're very trivia oriented. You're into the nuance. So here you go.
There's another Canadian kind of cult television show called Degrassi Junior High. And as a young person, I actually had a walk-on cameo on the show because I knew where it was. I'd met somebody who was on the show. I wanted to be on the show, so I just showed up on set one day because I knew from my friend where it was, and had me they had me as basically a glorified extra who asked one of the other characters to dance in the hall. Well, that was my one and only day on set, and because in a lot of that television everything's done ADR. There's additional dialogue recording and overdubbing to get rid of the ambient noise. They dubbed my voice.
Next song I would like to dedicate to all the girls of Degrassi Junior High.
Sleaze, wanna
It's gonna be a
dance?
slow song, so come on, you guys, get out there and ask those girls
Unbelievable.
to dance.
Who does that guy think he is?
Please write a love song, a song.
Do you remember anything about that day? Like, can you put yourself in the room or?
I remember it being ridiculously hot. So it was I think it was like the beginning of July, maybe mid-July, and it was like stupid stink, like mid 30s plus the humidity hot. And we were in a rehearsal space which was in like an industrial plaza type of thing. So one of those where you drove around to the back where the loading docks were in there, and then there was a stage set up, and it was actually a room that I'd rehearsed in before. It was a well-known kind of rehearsal studio space in the north end of Toronto at it was like Finch and Dufferin area. right? I'm trying to remember what the space was called. I remember the guy who used to run it. His name was Ray Sayer, but I can't for the life of me remember what this space was that like tons of bands would have rented out and played it at the time. Um, and so I remember basically we were all kind of wheeled up on stage one at a time, with Spencer sitting there with his notepad while the cameras are on. We were just told to go, play something, play something, play something. So I literally just cranked the amp up and was an asshole. Showed off as best I could. Um, and that was it. I don't remember a lot of the weeding out process, but I think there were three or four guitar players, and like there's three or four of everything that they would just like go up on stage and do your thing by yourself. Um, and then towards the end of the day, they were like, okay, these are the people who have made it, you, and you, and we're all going to go back to the house, which is, I guess, what their office and their house was, which was over like Sherburne and Bloor way. And so we went back there, we had beers, and then it was like, let's write a song.
And then I went up afterwards and played bass, auditioned. There were 5 or 6 bass players who auditioned, and I just played across a few different genres, did some slapping and some popping, and then just like straight up, metal, and then a couple other things. And they liked what they were looking for was a certain look, certain energy, and somebody who could play.
Do you remember much about the other two guys?
Not really. I remember that. I remember the other guitar player was like a young kid, really young, and the drummer I couldn't like. I think if I saw the guitar player today, the other kid, I would recognize him. The drummer I wouldn't know him if I tripped over. It's been, well, what? Or it's
20
almost
years.
20 years now.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah. Did Spenny know who you were? Or did you tell him and he picked up on it? Like, how did that play out?
No, they didn't know. I think at some point somebody on the crew probably, I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion as soon as they kind of knew who they wanted, they started backgrounding people, Googling in what way they could. Uh, you know, uh, at that point, it would have been like Friendster and MySpace to find out what they could have people, or to see if, that. And at some point, somebody on their crew figured out that I'd had this song on the radio at some point. And so yes, and I think that's probably why I got invited to be, to write the song with them. Um, but initially they didn't know, and I was really hoping I was going to get away without them knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't even think I was going to make part of the band. It's once again it was the joke that somehow kind of got out of hand, and now it's like, hey, can we work on this song together, and can we do this? Oh, okay.
So great. So they picked us. We didn't find out until a couple days later. Then they asked us to go back to the rehearsal studio, and they would brief us. And so we went and we met Spenny, and Spencer Rice, very friendly guy. Really articulate, great energy. He lived the show. And just told us about what he was doing with the competition. We didn't know what Kenny was doing, but Spenny wanted to create an amazing band. And the guy, evoked the Ramones. And so we just like hung out a little bit.
The thing, so he's neurotic, he is, but I think there is an amplification of that neurosis in the show. He was, no, I remember him as quite thoughtful, and the conversation we had as we were kind of creating the song was very natural, very organic, and kind of intuitive, and it was there was a lot of thought, and there was a good conversation that happened over the creation of the song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, we kind of tried a couple different grooves, and then we hit on the one that became the song. And so he was like, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, no. And then lyrically, he was doing things. And I was like, well, what if you do this? Right. And I can remember he was like, I just wanna, and he's like, what do I want to do? And I was like, just leave it hanging. Just leave the innuendo, man. Right. And that's why there's no resolve to I just wanna.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we literally sat there with me playing chords at him and changes and trying to figure out what we were going to do. Well, he scribbled in a notepad, which is, you know, that's the way songs get written. It's really the way songs get written in the real rock and roll world is you sit there and you go back and forth with somebody when you're co-writing and get it done. I remember at the time, the things I remember really about the show and the song is I remember it was a lot of fun. Remember it was crazy hot. I remember everybody worked really, really hard to try and to throw this thing together that was going to be on TV, right? um, from a musical perspective, as far as the song itself goes, I remember that yes, there was really supposed to be a punk rock ethic in it. That was supposed to have a late 70s kind of vibe to it. Um, ergo, once again, the kind of reference to they wanted to they wanted it to feel kind of like the Strokes. That was one of the things that Spenny wanted, and he also had that Iggy Pop thing that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I remember stupid things like the breakdown coming into the last chorus, where I snuck in some of my hard rock roots because those shots are really Night Train by Guns N' Roses musically. Ba ba ba ba ba ba. Right?
I can read a book and all kinds of stuff, yeah.
I was so excited when they let me get away. They didn't know I was going to do it, but I basically pulled the Kurt Cobain Saturday Night Live by flipping the guitar with "Fuck Kenny."
So we spent a very, very long day in a very hot studio up in Downsview, Ontario, just rehearsing and playing, and the cameras were rolling, and we were all sweating. And if you look at the scenes, especially in the outro of us playing and rocking, you could just see sweat flying everywhere. And it was just really, really epic and super fun. We were really excited to be able to play and work on the song, and it was all done in a day. Sorry, we jammed. Jay Englishman and Spencer Rice worked on the lyrics together and the refrain. I mean, it's very formulaic. It's derivative of the Ramones formula for songs, as far as, you know, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, musical, so like solo, outro, etc. But it really works, you know, super basic, high energy, amazing fun. And Spenny just lived it, you know, he was bouncing around, sweating, just like having a great time. And, you know, that's what rock and roll is all about, you know, really enjoyed that. So great. We planned to have a big concert. We were all looking forward to it. You know, we were downtown having a beer at Spenny's house. I think it might have been the house where Kenny and Spenny lived together. I'm not sure. And, you know, the news broke, which was cripplingly disappointing. And that's just life. That's okay. But it was a really, really fun experience.
A plot point of the episode is that you guys get a call and then you don't actually show up to the climactic final performance. What do you remember about that in particular?
Oh, we were basically, we got a call saying that the date had been moved.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be the next day, and then yeah, we were called and told it was rescheduled.
And then what happens after that? Did you show up to a later date that never happened, or did you get another call that said,
No,
oh, well,
and
actually...
then there was another call. basically, if I remember correctly, there was the first. I remember getting a voicemail, and then afterwards, we found out afterwards, like we found out what happened, right? But yeah, initially it was like it's pushed. We're gonna because can't remember where the school was. I remember that when we left the rehearsal hall, it was supposed to be the next day that we were supposed to show up, and then I got the voicemail, and then after that, like it was later the day after where Spencer called me and he was like, "We got screwed."
How did you feel, right? You help write the song, you're in there and you're like loving it and you're amped up. And then you're
I
like, you won't be in the episode anymore. It's over.
You know what? I wasn't that emotionally invested in it. From what they'd explained to me about the show, from what we knew, now it hadn't aired at that point, right? Like nothing had aired, but they had explained it to us. I think we got to see some rushes from like the pilot. I'm trying to remember now. It's a long time ago, and there's a blur. There's a real blur.
Mm-hmm.
But we understood what the concept of the show was, and how we understood that Spencer would always try to do things the right way and Kenny would always try to cheat. So when I found out that Kenny had cheated, I wasn't surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It kind of made sense, like, oh, that's how they're going to resolve the
And I'm just a pawn in the game.
that's how they're going to resolve the show.
Yeah.
I get it now. There isn't going to be a judge. Kenny just wins.
You never got to
Right?
meet Kenny though, probably, or maybe you did.
No,
Yeah.
no, but it was once again, it was like they told us what the premise was. They wound us up, and we all just ran with it.
Of course, yeah, right. And Kenny did the same thing to his kids.
So there you go. We recorded, it was in the show, and it aired on TV. I got together with some friends. We watched that, and I was living on at 75 Markham Street in Toronto, downtown at Bathurst and Queen at the time, and got to watch the show, and it's great. I never thought I would ever think about Kenny versus Spenny again after that, other than just as something to watch on TV. So 2005, June 2005, I moved to Sweden, living in Stockholm, working in this amazing company over Central Station in downtown Sweden. And I'm at work in the September, and somebody comes up to me and says, "I saw you on TV last night." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, you were in this amazing show." I'm like, "Really?" And there were a lot of people in my office at the time and socially, because Kenny versus Spenny was a prime time show in Sweden at the time. I had no idea. So they showed it in English, I think, with Swedish subtitles. And that episode I was in, I guess that season, was on constant rotation. So I was like a D-list or an E-list celebrity in Stockholm for a period of time as that was on TV, which is hilarious. So then I ended up moving from Sweden briefly through Vienna, and I'm living in Asia. For 3 years, I was working for Poker Stars, running BizDev, creating Asia Pacific Poker Tour, and a bunch of poker stuff. And the show was on TV everywhere. Like, it was super random. In Australia, they were on repeats. People in Asia had seen it. And I guess I have a bit of a distinctive look. And people would be like, "Oh my God, were you playing bass?" I'm like, "Yeah." Anyways, years later, so super current as well. I'm now living in Denmark, and I work for a Munich incorporated company, and I'm regularly in Germany. And it turns out Kenny versus Spenny has also been regularly on TV in Germany, but it's dubbed into German. And the German episode I'm playing in, all of my like the very few lines we have are dubbed into German, except the rock and roll song is in English. And somebody showed this to me, and I laughed. I mean, it's amazing the level of exposure these guys have got, but also the level of joy they've given to people. Because silliness, macho competition, just the desire to win is a universal theme. And everybody wants to cheer on the underdog. And it's just fantastic that I'm able to be on the team of the underdog in that episode that has just been aired all over the world. And, I don't think I was paid anything at the time other than beer and pizza, which I enjoyed. And it's been on the air around the world. I'm not getting paid any royalties for that. But again, I'm fine with that. It's just so funny to have people run into me all over the time and say, "Were you playing bass in that show?" I'm like, "Yes." And then, of course, you reached out and we were able to have this conversation today.
And it's more, it tends to be like coworkers, or there's always that one person that you run into, and they it's far enough back now that they'll find out about the music career, because somebody always that you work with in an organization wants to make something of the fact that you were in a band somewhere at one point. But then one day somebody walks in and they're like, dude, I was at home last night. I rolled a great big fatty. I was sitting on my couch eating Doritos, watching Kenny versus Spenny on, whatever stream. You were on the show, man. That was awesome, right? So that's what tends to happen. So I don't think there's never been a man on the street moment, but there's always been that work acquaintance, or that acquaintance of the acquaintance that you run into, that you kind of see every so often, and then they're a fan of the show and they're like, wait a second.
Have you seen the episode?
Yes.
How recently? Was it like once when it aired and never again?
I saw it once when it aired, and then I think there was like 5 years later, there was like a rerun again, and now it's like you can YouTube it. So
Do you remember like just what you thought about it? Like, just separate from the fact that you're in it, right? The fact that you're in it maybe gave you a reason to watch it, but like when you watched it,
that was really to be quite honest, I'm not a reality television fan. Like, it's not my thing. If I hadn't been in the show, probably wouldn't have watched it. And like I our episode maybe would have watched because it was music based, but that's really
do you
the only reason.
after season 1, there's 5 more seasons, and it gets progressively more like raunchy and insane. Did you ever catch it later?
Yeah, I saw 1 or 2 episodes along. Every now and again, you'd be flipping through the TV, and you'd be like, oh, well, I'll stop and watch for a minute, and then be like, not for me. Like, not to like, I don't. It wasn't that it was. It just didn't. It didn't do it for me. There were a couple that I watched, right, where I was like, ooh, right, and the humiliations at the end sometimes were kind of funny. But also, it's just like the show was kind of niche in some ways, and I think still is. And I'm still kind of surprised when people recognize me for it, because it's so not part of my day to day. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I totally get that it's gone on to have this, not just my episode, but like the show itself has gone on to have this crazy cult following. And there are people that love it, and so they should.
I've seen it a few times, but it does not surprise me at all that it goes to incredible levels of raunch. Kenny and Spenny, when the cameras are off, are really unfiltered.
Gotcha. Do you want to tell me more about that, or no?
Listen, I had a really fun, as I said, earlier. We ended up jamming out for most of the day, playing lots of cover songs, drinking lots of beer, eating lots of pizza. Sweaty men in a very hot room, and we just had a really great time. And nothing. It's like the prelude to a gay love story. It wasn't like that at all. It was just really fun. Guys bonding, and we were just like talking and hanging out. It was a great experience. I have very fond memories of being on that show.
There are people who have done covers of the I Just Wanna song. Have you ever listened to that?
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, please send me the links. I'm absolutely raring to hear those.
I gladly I'll shoot you them. I think there's at least one. But yeah, I'll have to find it.
But all I wanna do all the time is I just wanna.
Wow. Okay, that's cool.
Do you still do any of that? Do you miss it? Do you feel like the opportunity's come and gone? Or
No. I kind of did my thing. I don't think I've stepped out on stage well over a decade. And no, I mean there was talk pre-pandemic we were going to come back and kind of do this one-off reunion show with the band, and then that got shut down because it was, COVID. That was going to be the 20th anniversary. I may at the 25th anniversary consider doing it again. It's kind of where I'm looking. I'd like to go out and put a bow on things, just because like most music careers that go up and down and up and down, I walked away. So it kind of ended. It ended in a face plant. It'd be nice to go out and take a bow. But as far as doing it every day or living that lifestyle, no. It's a young man's game, and it's like I had a lot of fun, but no, I don't want to do that again.
I'm in the middle of the young man's game, I think, comparatively. So
Yeah. Whereabouts are you?
I'm in the United States.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah,
Are you American?
I am American. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So how did you find out about the show?
That's a good question. So, I was a part of an internet forum, which is also a thing that's kind of come and gone culturally. And we had people from all over the world, and someone made a thread once that said, "Hey, this is a hilarious show. It's on the air right now. You should check it out." And Kenny has always been connected to like the internet and technology. Even though he's maybe around your age, he got in early, right? So. The part of why this show thrived is because it has always been on YouTube for basically as long as YouTube's been around, and it's been on the internet. So even though I was American, you could still just link me a clip and I could go watch it, right? So that boundary isn't there, but it does mean that if I go out, or like when I'm with my friends, or when I was in high school, no one knew what the hell I was talking about when I mentioned this show, right?
So when did you discover the show?
Probably 2011 or 2012, which was right when it was ending.
God, yeah. So like well after, because like when it was here, like when it was being broadcast, it was being broadcast on CBC, which is like it's like our PBS. Right? So yeah, it like I didn't even know until much later that it was available outside of Canada.
Yeah, well, it's amazing, right? Because so it was on the CBC, and I only know this stuff because I've just like fallen headfirst into the cult fascinating aspects of it, and over the course of the last couple of years I've just learned more and more. But it was on the CBC for the first season, and they kind of said, this is a little too edgy for us, even though it's pretty tame. And Showcase picked it up, and that's where it kind of snowballed into this. I don't want to call it horrible because I love it, but a horrible monster of just really racy, even edgier humor, right? So I think that gave it legs. And then another thing is that they licensed the format across the world. So like just the concept of, hey, these two guys are going to live together and compete.
So is there like a Russian Kenny versus Spenny?
Yeah,
like
there's a Portuguese. There's a Portuguese Aldo e Nilton. There's a Turkish Cenk versus Erdem. There in the Netherlands, there's Bridget versus Katja, which is two women, and it's all the same formula. There's the one guy who's kind of scummy and cheats, and then there's the Charlie Brown trying to kick the football Spenny type who's a goody two shoes playing by the rules, and sometimes they even do the same competitions, and sometimes the same things even happen in the same episode, meaning they basically do a shot-for-shot remake of what Kenny and Spenny did, which is really... In fact, the Turkish one has a better concert episode. So you have a Turkish counterpart in the Turkish Spenny band.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
İstesem kitaplar okur, her şeyi öğrenirdim. İstesem gitar çalar, müzikle eğlenirdim. İstesem çok çalışır, hem kazanıp hem yerdim. Ama tek isteğim seni yenmek. Yenileceksin, yenileceksin.
It would be way better if they had like a. I'd love to see like a Spanish dubbed me.
So okay, it looks like you, but then there's a Spanish guy over.
Yes, with the.
There's a German dubbed
know.
you.
Ich will dich einfach nur schlagen, Kenny. Wenn wir damit nicht gewinnen, dann weiß ich auch nicht. Versuch das zu schlagen, Kenny. Versuch das mal zu schlagen.
Do you have a strong, as someone who likes music, do you have a strong feeling? Maybe the answer is probably going to be no. Do you have a strong feeling about Kenny's concert? The fact that he had this kids choir. Did you think that could have stood up against?
I thought it was kind of cringe comedy when I saw it. Right. So it was like, which is what I think what they were going for with in the show to begin with. Mm-hmm. So I mean, like. Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, "Oh God, really?" It was kind of like watching a Larry David skit.
In my office, on the back wall. Sorry, are we still connected?
Yeah.
Good. On the back wall, I have some of the.
It'll probably settle. Yeah.
So I still have the guitars on the back wall, and this is one of the indie bands I played in the '90s, right? So. And this is some art from Laura Zombie, who's a Toronto-based independent artist. It's cool.
Oh, and another thing, and this blew Jeff's mind, so I'll mention it to you. There are covers of I Just Wanna.
Now I want royalties.
I don't know how much of that there is. It's a very cult show. It's cult enough to have covers of the song, but not popular enough for something like that. I don't know.
There are people have covered this.
I mean, it's like, I mean, everything's a meme nowadays, but like it's a meme. Like making fun of Spenny by saying I just wanna is a thing people do. It's like a jeer. It's a heckle to him. Because it evokes that lonely moment on stage when he's been stripped of his band and he's still just kind of a cappella singing his song, and it's so pathetic that he's standing his ground, right? That's one of many things people yell at him or mock him with. It is strange.
That's awful. That's awful.
But people are so mean to him. But that's the beauty of the show, right?
You worked so hard on the song.
Well, maybe this will deter people. They'll hear that, like, oh, it's not just about Spenny being pathetic. There was heart and soul and thought and talent behind that song. Yeah. We shouldn't drag it through the mud or associate it with him being dumb. Oddly enough, me and kind of the next 3 or 4 of the people I've met from the fan base are also American. One in New Jersey, one in Florida, one in California. Obviously, I know a lot of the Canadians too, but there's reach down here and around the world for the show.
The crazy little show from Toronto.
Yep.
That's great.